All right, like I said, we are going to talk about opioids in our community. So let me share my screen. Uh-oh, if my internet goes out, sorry. All right, let's start from the beginning. Also, if you have questions, comments, or anything, feel free to put it in the chat box. So let's talk about our community. Is our community influenced by the opioid epidemic? All right, first things first, let me switch to my notes. First things first, what do you know about the opioid epidemic? If you don't know anything about the opioid epidemic, that's okay. I'm going to be sharing with you some interesting facts about the opioid epidemic. But if you don't know anything, or if you do, go ahead and put it in the chat box and let me know. I'm interested to see what you know about the opioid epidemic. If not, nothing. Okay, cool. That's fine if you know nothing about it. That's okay. So the opioid epidemic has affected a lot of people, actually. And there's a lot of people that are fighting opioids and, you know, tearing families apart and all that good stuff. So we are going to get into it a little bit more about what is the opioid epidemic, how it's affected people, emergency room related costs, and a solution for it. So it's affecting our country in many ways. We are going to get into it a little bit more. All right, so fact versus fiction. Go ahead and type it into the chat box. I'm going to ask you a few questions, and I want you to tell me if it's true or false, okay? If you're wrong, don't worry about it. If you're right, good for you. But we're all here to learn, so do not be afraid to answer, right or wrong. We're here, again, we don't know anything. We're learning about this. So, first question. There's only one way to stop the opioid epidemic. Hold on. Yes, there's only one way to stop the opioid epidemic, get everyone treatment. Is that true or is that false? There's only one way to stop the opioid epidemic. Yes, false. It is false. Treatment and prevention are both important. So yes, that is false. Number two, one way to stop the opioid epidemic is prevention. True or false? One way to stop the opioid epidemic is prevention. True, yes. A point for both of you. Yes, so prevention can stop new cases from occurring. So good job. Question three. The doctor and patient relationship is critical in prevention and opioid addiction. True or false? Yep. True. Y'all are on a roll. Yes. So doctors have the responsibility to practice good medicine and only prescribe opioids when necessary. Patients need to be educated to what makes good sense. Next question. It makes sense to get a narcotic drug for minor pain. It makes sense to get narcotic drug for minor pain. Minor pain. Yep, both of y'all got it. Yep, it's false. Opioids should only be used for serious pain or issues. Next. A massive educational campaign can be a form of prevention. A mass educational campaign can be a form of prevention. A mass educational campaign can be a form of prevention. So this one can be a little tricky. A little tricky, but I'll go ahead and tell you. If you answered true, then yes, education is very important to help people understand how addictive opioids can be. All right, moving on to our next question. Community-based resources for opioid addiction are an important part of recovery. So think of like your community, like community-based resources that you have for opioid addiction are important for part of recovery. So yes, y'all got it. True. A robust support network for the person and their family is important. So for you to get outside sources and help is very, very important. School systems should provide factual information to students. School systems should provide factual information to students. Yep, you're on a roll. So yes, true. Scare tactics don't work. You know how school always gives you those scare tactics, like the people with like the hole in their throat when they're, you know, about smoking, or like people are crashing and dying. Like those are scare tactics that they're using, and those don't work. So giving people factual information is what actually helps, and giving them like the actual facts and not just scare tactics. Like, this could happen to you if you do this. That doesn't seem to work. Or a big one that doesn't work either is just say no. Those don't work. All right, insurance companies can help the opioid epidemic by putting more money towards treatment. True or false? Insurance companies can help the opioid epidemic by putting more money towards treatment. Okay, yeah, y'all got it. Yes, true. This would be more helpful than paying for more prescription for opioids. So a lot of insurance just approve, you know, any type of opioids. Like, oh, little Johnny needs Xanax because he had a really bad break and he needs it for his leg, right? And then let's say little Johnny's better, but he's complaining about more pain, so they're quick to say yes to it. Instead of, you know, putting this towards for treatment. All right, next, addiction is not a disease. True or false? Addiction is not a disease. Y'all is on a roll. Yes, false. Addiction or substance use disorder is a disease, and we shouldn't treat it as a crime. So it is a disease. Last one. The media can help to fight the opioid epidemic. True or false? The media can help fight the opioid epidemic. True. Yep. The media can help to provide education on it. Yes, agreed. Totally agreed. Y'all did awesome, by the way. Okay, so everyone in the community has a responsibility to do their part when preventing and treating opioid epidemic. Being educated about opioid use is something that we can do to help us make good decisions that are healthy for us. So if we're not told about the opioid epidemic, we're just gonna think it's some random word, right? But no, being able to educate you guys about opioid is very important. That way you guys know and aren't kind of left in the dark about it. So we're about to watch this. It's a 9-minute video, so hold tight for me. It's a 9-minute video, but it's really interesting because it talks about your brain as a teenager. And I don't want to give too much away, but it talks about your brain, how it's developing, and all that good stuff. So let's watch it. If I feel like it gets too off, then we can stop it and you can watch it at your own time. But let's go ahead and start this. Let me know if you can hear it, okay? And I don't think y'all can see this. Let me know if you can see the screen. Can y'all see my screen? It says, it's like a YouTube video. Okay, cool. Let me turn it up for y'all.
Hi, thank you. I love your enthusiasm. Your energy and excitement is really what makes me love my job. And my job is to study the adolescent brain. I'm a scientist at UCLA, as Jake said. So scientists have studied the brain for centuries, but it's only been in the last 15 years or so that we've discovered one of the most fascinating things. And that is that your brain changes every single day. As you sit in this room, your brain is changing in response to my voice, in response to the person next to you. And your experiences and the people you affiliate with shape the way your brain ultimately develops. We also know that the brain matures and continues to do so past childhood and into the teenage years and well into your mid-20s. So most of you in this room today, as middle and high school students, don't yet have a fully mature brain. But this is actually really beneficial if we think about one of the functions of adolescence, which is to establish your independence from a caregiver. because your brain as an adolescent is built to help you do that. Compared to children and adults, the teenage brain is really good at seeking out new experiences, enjoying thrills, and seeking out risks. It's also really good at recognizing social or being sensitive to social and emotional information. And so for that reason, the teenage brain is really responsive to rewards and emotions when making decisions. And in my laboratory at UCLA and laboratories all around the world, we're interested in uncovering that very question. How does the teenage brain make decisions? One of the first discoveries relevant to this topic was made when we discovered that the part of your brain in the very front, called the prefrontal cortex, which is the last brain region to develop, because your brain develops from the back to the front, continues to change up until the mid-20s. And the reason this is relevant is because the prefrontal cortex is a part of your brain that helps you think about the consequences or potential consequences of your actions before you do them. It helps you regulate your behavior and your emotions. And so it makes sense that if this part of the brain isn't fully available until well past adolescence, then teenagers may make more impulsive decisions with less regard for the potential future consequences. But we now know that the story is far more interesting and complicated than that. And in fact, what we really need to do is think about how brain regions that are not at the surface of your brain, but in the deeper layers, how they change. And one region we focus on is called the striatum. And the striatum is the key component of the reward system. So when you receive something that you find rewarding, your striatum is very responsive and it releases something called dopamine. And this is the case not just in humans, but in kids, in mice, in rats, in monkeys. All of these organisms respond really with a lot of excitement in their brain when they get something they like. So in my lab, we study this reward system across development, and especially in teenagers. And we do that by asking people to come to the laboratory and perform what's called a functional magnetic resonance imaging scan, or fMRI. And the beauty of fMRI is that you can take a snapshot of the brain in motion. So while you are experiencing something you like, or while you are making a decision, we capture how your brain is responding to that, how your brain is active. And so to study the reward system, what we did is not simply show people pictures of reward, which is what mostly happens in brain imaging studies. But instead what we did is we actually gave someone a reward. And what's something that people find rewarding? Sugar. So what we did is we asked people to come to the lab. We asked a group of teenagers and a group of adults. And while they were in the MRI, we hooked them up to a straw. And we fed them squirts of sugar water every so often. And first we asked them whether they liked it. Maybe they weren't going to like the sugar as much as we thought. But they actually did. This is a rating scale asking them, how much do you like the sugar? And the average response is in red for the teenage group, and the adults is shown in white. And you can see that everybody liked it, but it's the teenage group who showed this exaggerated sensitivity. They really liked it. So we started to wonder whether there was something neurobiological that represented this difference. So instead of focusing on the prefrontal cortex, which is what a lot of brain scientists who study adolescents do, we looked at the deeper layers of the brain. So in this image, which is actually a real human brain image, averaged together among all our participants, we saw that in the deeper layers, here represented with this this yellow activation, the striatum was really excited to the sugar water. And this was across all age groups. But the really cool thing was observed when we looked at the differences between the teenagers and the adults. Here again, I'm showing you the magnitude of activation. That is how excitable the brain was in the teenagers compared to the adults. So this very simple reward of sugar. And you can see that the teenagers were much more excited to the same exact stimulus and in the same exact region of the brain. It's the teenage brain that was going crazy. It was really excited to get it. And when we associated that with their ratings of the sugar, it was only in the teenage group where we saw that people who showed greater activation in the brain in response to the sugar also told us they liked it more. So that means that in real time, at the very moment your brain gets something that it likes, it will make you think that it's better. And you can think or imagine that in future circumstances, your brain will encode that information and remember that you liked it. So it will bias your decisions toward getting more rewards. And that's what happens during adolescence. But to ensure that this wasn't just specific to something as simple as sugar, we gave people something else that everybody likes. And we did this while they were in the MRI. And what's something else that everyone loves to get? Money, right? Money. Everybody likes money. So we brought in a whole separate group of teenagers and adults. And this time we threw in a group of kids in there who were between about 7 and 10. And we found that, again, the part of the brain that was most responsive was the striatum, shown here on the left. This is a brain scan showing the average.
All right, cool. So she said the most important thing that I wanted her to say. So I'm going to stop my share real quick. Okay, because I want y'all to see. So I don't know if Ellen has done this yet. So she was talking about the prefrontal cortex, like, let's say this is your brain, right? And she was talking about the prefrontal cortex is the last to develop, okay? And we learned this in mindfulness, and I'm not sure if Ellen has done this with you guys yet, like I said, but she will eventually do this. So what we like to call this is kind of our brain, right? So this is your stem, right? Like your brain stem. So this controls like your breathing and making sure that, you know, you're moving, all that good stuff. This right here is a little a. This is your amygdala, okay? So we like to call this we like to call your lizard brain, right? Because it's just your basic functions like breathing and just making sure you're moving, but pretty much just controlling your breathing, right? Keeping you alive. So we call it your lizard brain because it's lazy. This is your amygdala, okay? So we like to call this your monkey brain. Your monkey brain is what's on most of the time, especially for teenagers. Your prefrontal cortex is kind of that layer that goes over the amygdala, and this makes you think. Like this is all your decision making. This is your, I don't know if you can see it, you're rationalizing, like you're thinking things through, you're thinking about the consequences. A lot of you guys think like this with your monkey brain. So you're thinking, hey, it probably would be really fun to get on top of a car, the hood of a car, and drive down my driveway like I'm surfboarding on the top of my hood, right? That's what you guys, like teenagers would be like, this is so cool. Prefrontal cortex would probably be like, I don't think that's a good idea. You could break a bone. It could be really bad. Probably you shouldn't do it. Your parents will probably get really mad. Don't do it. But this doesn't develop till the age of 25. So right now, it's developing for you right now. And sometimes you have these moments where you're thinking rationally, but sometimes you have moments where you're not thinking rationally. You're just thinking with emotion and you're going with what you feel. So that's kind of what she's talking about is right now, this is the kind of brain you have. At 25, you're going to be thinking rationally. I'm not saying that you're never going to rationally think. No, sometimes it flips up and forth. At the clubhouse, we use the term don't flip, you're flipping your lid. So if you're acting crazy, you're going wild, we say, hey, you need to bring your lid down because you're being crazy and you're thinking with your monkey brain. You need to bring it down and think with your prefrontal cortex. So that's kind of what she's talking about. Eventually, you'll only think with your prefrontal cortex because you'll think about the consequences and everything that's going on. But like I said, right now, your amygdala is still kind of flipped. Your lid is kind of flipped. You're kind of thinking, you know, like the rush and the cool things. You're not really thinking about consequences. So that's what she's talking about. And that's what we're going to get into about opioids. So with opioids, your brain is still under construction, okay? It makes it more likely for you to do risky behavior and experiment because you're not really thinking it through, right? So that's kind of where the opioids kind of have an easy way in with teens and the youth right now, is that they're not really thinking, they're not thinking about the consequences, they're just thinking of the now and how it'll make them feel and how cool it is. But that's when addiction starts as well. So let's go back to our PowerPoint. Where were we? Oops. Okay. So, like I said, your brain's under construction. You're more predominant to do risky behaviors and experiment. You know, there's some parental pressure maybe, like to do good in school. So you're vulnerable to heroin and prescription opioids, school pressures. Maybe people at school are doing it, you know? So there's a lot of reasons why people would try it. And there's just a lot of pressures. As a teenager, it's not easy to be a teen. I've been there. It's not easy. So I know there's a lot of pressure. So summary, making decisions can be influenced by our emotions. So if we're feeling a certain way, our decision is going to influence that. Teenagers are more likely to react to strong emotions. Teens' brains are at risk for addiction because it's still developing. Identifying healthy ways to help us feel good and make us feel better choice. So maybe identify what makes you feel better. So maybe going for a run, or, you know, sitting down listening to music, playing a game, doing something other than, you know, turning to bad habits. All right. Sorry, I'm trying to pull up my chat, which I don't know where it went. So 1 second. Where's my chat? I cannot see it. Oh, there it is. Okay. Okay. Oh no. Oh no. It took us all the way back. Okay. 1 second. Okay. Okay. Finding the facts. Here we go. All right. So for this, our community, do you think our community is impacted by the opioid epidemic? I think the whole world is actually impacted by the opioid epidemic. So I think that that is a thing, you know? It's going on in the world, and a lot of people find articles. So we're going to get into like articles and credible sources. So this is just giving you kind of a widespread of what websites can be trusted, right? So a domain is, of course, you should know, it's at the end of a website. So www.johnnyiscool.com, right? That's like a business or commercial. .org is like a nonprofit organization. So our website is nxtgenerationgeorgia.org. So we are a nonprofit organization. So that's why we have org. .net is for a network organizer. .edu is more of like an education institution, and .gov is for a government site. So for you, if let's say you want to make a website and you're selling things, yours most likely would be .com instead of any of the other ones. So .org and .edu are typically more credible sites than other sites, okay? So keep that in mind, especially when you're doing schoolwork and stuff, keep that in mind. So a research plan. So let's talk about, how does our community have an opioid addiction problem? So our community might not have it. Some communities have it more than others. I think there is an opioid problem in our county, but I think it's bigger in others. So it affects a lot of people, right? That's why, just to point it out there, our sheriff's office, at least in Dawson County, there's a place for you to dispose of any opioids or pills maybe that you're not taking anymore. You can dispose of them there. So this is just kind of talking about facts and, you know, how to do your research, making sure there are valid resources, how to find, you know, research resources on the opioid epidemic. So this is more of like in person, which is why I'm kind of skipping over it, because we can't really do it right now. So skipping over that. Okay, skipping over that. So skipping over that, guess what? We are done. So pretty much, I'll just go through what the, one second, what the research is pretty much on this. It's just pretty much you researching what opioids are being affected in your community, how your community is being affected, how you know the resources are credible, how to make sure you know how to research these areas. But overall, looking into your community to seeing if opioid is a problem. Like I said, some of us, the opioid epidemic might not be as big in our county as it is in other counties. I know, like for us at one point, vaping was a big thing. So it might be vaping, it might be opioids. It's just really good to be aware of your community and the opioid epidemic and how it's been changing in the whole world, in the United States, and how it's been a big issue, and it's rising. It's not going down, it's not getting better, it's only getting worse. So just being aware of that and knowing the facts is important, and making sure that you're getting credible resources, because some of us could be on Facebook and an ad comes up or an article comes up about the opioid epidemic. It's not safe to always trust it. That's why you need to kind of do your research to make sure that what you're reading and the information you're giving somebody else is credible. Because if you ask me, or if you tell me something, I would like to know where you got it from, so that I know, not doubting you, but just wanting to know like where you got it from, just to make sure it's something credible, right? So we learned a lot this week and last week about opioids and endorphins and neurons and the opioid epidemic. So we're going to kind of move on from that into something else and kind of bring it back and touch back on it later on. But thank y'all for coming. Thank y'all for being here. I'm going to stop this recording.